Well, he was a very private individual in a lot of ways, so I don't necessarily have anything to volunteer right now, but I think over time it'll become more and more clear, what an amazing contribution to humanity he made, in addition to the contributions he made to the industry and to the technology world.
Someone once told me, and I don't know if it's true, but I think that Steve never went to China. I mean, this place that sort of is having such a huge impact, that his passion, and this may have been because of illness, but that his passion was home and family and going to Apple to work and to get things done. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's right. In fact, you could those of us who live in and around Palo Alto, you could often see Steve, walking around. He'd stop by the Apple store in Palo Alto and talk to the customers. He was, legendary, obviously, for his work ethic. He spent a tremendous amount of time, building Apple. He spent a tremendous amount of time working on Apple, and for Apple, even in the time when he was unable to be there in person every day. And then, yes, he, was incredibly committed to family, and has an absolutely wonderful family and a wife and 3 kids, and then a daughter from his previous relationship, and they were in their own right just amazing people, and that was the most. I think family ultimately was, as you'd expect, the most important thing in the world to him.
He would get out in Stanford in and around the community and have dinner with friends and come to your house and other places?
I drive up and down Embarcadero Road in Palo Alto, all the time, going back and forth and things. And one time I'm, booking in my car down Embarcadero, and I go by, this guy, and I just see out of the corner of my eye, right ready to cross the street, black turtleneck jeans, and I'm like, oh my God, I almost hit Steve Jobs. Not uncommon for people in and around Palo Alto to see him walking around like that.
Yeah. Eric, the question will be raised, what happens to Apple after Steve Jobs? Eric?
Tim was operating president when I was on the board, and Tim's a very, very capable executive. As you know, he's now CEO. So I think the gifts that Steve has given us will continue for many, many years. The great thing about Apple is that the executives are there, they're not going anywhere, and they've got a very good forward story. So for all of you and all of us who are fans of Apple products, I think they'll continue to come and they'll do very well. The economic engine that Steve built is an amazing one in terms of cash generation, revenue growth, global footprint, distribution. It's just a great business. One of the great American success stories as a person, but also as a company.
There's also the legendary competitiveness that he had. So you're at Google, and you're the one-time CEO at the time. I think that you were sitting on the Apple board, and then chairman of Google. And all of a sudden, you have to leave the board because you're going to be in a competitive business. How did that sit with Steve?
Well, as part of my joining the board, we understood that Apple and Google were going to be companies that were going to both partner and compete. And we agreed that if it became more compete than partner, it was the right thing to do to split up. So it was all actually very cordial. And Steve and I were and remain good friends. And I have just extraordinary respect for his leadership. So on a personal basis, it was fine, and I think it was the right thing to be part of Apple. It's also the right thing to leave the board when we did.
You ever see him angry?
Oh yes, Steve is a man of great passion, and he took a very, very...
You're smiling.
Yeah. He took a very, very strong position about what he wanted, how he wanted, and he was a very, very strong advocate for his company. So if you're on the other side of a deal with Steve, you're going to have a pretty tough negotiation, which is to his credit. He did a very good job for his shareholders.
Mark, you ever see him angry?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, Steve, we often talk out in California. We use this phrase a lot, California casual, or California fake casual, which is a lot of people in California want to go along, get along, and everybody's nice to each other and smiles to each other's faces. And then when somebody leaves the room, they're like, oh, that guy's a real son of a whatever. Steve's not like that. Steve was never like that. Steve was always somebody who would tell you exactly where he stood. He would tell you exactly what he thought, and so the clarity of the communication that you could have with him. There was, no wasted time. There was no wasted effort. Everything was crystal clear and unbelievably effective. And I think that quality permeates all of Apple's culture, and is one of the reasons that they're such an amazing company.
Yeah, but if you look at Steve's ability to negotiate, and the fact that he was able to get the historic deals he did with the music industry at a time when it was impossible, that showed you his ability to negotiate deals. Very, very clever, very, very aggressive for the positions that he wanted, and he typically got them.
Yeah, and interesting about that, Eric, is that there was great conflict between Steve and Michael Eisner when Michael was the CEO. of Disney, and they couldn't decide on a number of things, including Pixar. And then when Bob Iger came in, I think he cultivated Steve, and they were able to make a deal.
Right. Yes, Steve had strong opinions about the structure of the industry, but if you look at, for example, the original music deals that he did, they really defined a platform of monetization for music that people had been looking for years, and yet he literally pushed it himself. He said, there will be a platform, this is, 7 or 8 years ago, there will be a platform, it will have this pricing, you will like it, we will make it happen. So he used very, very clever negotiating skills to establish a platform that millions of people use today, and that served as a basis for monetization for content for many years in the future, I think.
There's also this, Mark, his relationship to Bill Gates. Bill Gates was, they even made a movie about the two of them. Bill Gates was coming along when Steve originally was in the computer business with Wozniak and developing the first Apple, and Bill Gates was developing Microsoft and software. What was that? Can you give us some sense of a historical perspective on that relationship?
Yeah, I think that Steve and Bill Gates and Andy Grove, I think if you had to pick three people, are the people who really built the personal computer industry, over the last 30, 35 years.
Right. Intel and the rest.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, I think in retrospect, I think the way it will be described is that they drove each other to greatness. And so, there were points in time when one of them or another had to jump strategically or have, the bigger market valuation or the bigger revenue. But all three would continuously drive each other to greater and greater heights. And, I think that Apple was an inspiration to Microsoft for many years in terms of the products. And there were, over time, there were various resemblances. And then, when Microsoft was very successful as a business and very successful with their products, when Steve came back to Apple, I think it was, I think Steve was determined to make sure that Apple would be able to, be a very successful company. And what at the time was Microsoft, dominated the world and, of course, did an amazing job doing that to the point where Apple is now worth, I think, double maybe what Microsoft is. And so the result has been just an enormous amount of positive development for the world, for the economy, and for the industry. The products that were created through that kind of two-layer, three-way dynamic have powered the industry and made all the other amazing things in the industry possible.
What's even more...
We join now... go ahead, Eric.
If you go back and look at the press in 1994 and 1995, Apple had been completely written off, was allegedly near bankruptcy. When Steve came in, imagine fighting against those odds as an executive, as a leader, as a person, and look at what he achieved in that period.
And the reason he was able to do it is he created a product, the Mac, that people wanted to buy, correct?
He had an installed base of people who loved the feeling of the Mac, but the technology had lagged. A sheer force of will, he built a platform that is now the best in the world for what it does.
And what this device does is extraordinary. You can browse the web with it. It is the best browsing experience you've ever had. It's phenomenal to see a whole web page right in front of you and you can manipulate with your fingers. It's unbelievably great. Way better than a laptop. Way better than a smartphone. And you can turn an iPad any way you want. Up, down, sideways. It automatically adjusts however you want to use it. And again, to see the whole web page is phenomenal. Right there, holding the internet in your hands. It's an incredible experience.
Because I know him so well, so much of having the mind that wants to go into the future and use the newer products sooner and go the directions that I would like to go and that the world goes, and having a very clear picture of not building little devices, but building a system that the human gets a job done they want to do done with the least thing in it.
So how do you characterize his skill then? I mean, it's that, being able to look at systems, being able to see markets, and what else?
Well, it's not just markets, but it's like, let's see iPod. The iPod is not a music device, and all the other music systems were music devices. The iPod is a part of what the human really wants, and the human really wants music to your ear. We want to make it easy. Apple has the whole system. You click one button to purchase a song, it's on your computer, it's on your iPod. No thinking, no doing. It's that kind of bending the technology, putting a lot of software and work into making the technology do things that
but is that really genius?
I think so, yeah. I think more than anything else, it's really...
understanding what the human wants
Yes, and making it as
And what they're
simple,
more
so the
likely to
human
buy.
doesn't have to tangle with technology and technology terms and technology methods, and get rid of a lot of that as much as possible. Now, you can't do a perfect job, ever. And you can't do a very good job at all these days because there's so much pressure to put software out quickly. But at least, Steve, definitely, his thinking shows up in a lot of Apple products along those lines. And he's had that thinking, along with a lot of other of his ways of thinking, really persisted from very early experiences in his life in technology, and they really don't go away. And that one I admire the most.
How would you characterize the difference in the two of you?
Oh, I was intent to design products to be part of a revolution that was going to change life for people, to be part of a goodness of humanity with my design talents as an engineer. I represent the engineer. When we started Apple, we actually sat down and said, I would be an engineer. Steve would learn to do everything in the company and learn to be an executive at that level. Mike Barclay was experienced in marketing and would do the marketing. And so about that time, our 7-year, best friendship split apart ways. He was a different part of the company. He had different goals. He wanted to change the world. He wanted to bring computing to the masses. He wanted to make a lot of money. And really, all I wanted to do was design the hottest computer that every engineer in the world would look at me and say, wow, look at those wires you connected that way. Wow, incredible.
So if you look at Apple, how much difference can one person make? When the French fired Napoleon after that little problem in Russia, Napoleon said, France has more need of Napoleon than Napoleon has need of France. And you buy into that idea? I think one person can make a tremendous difference. Look at Apple with Steve Jobs, Apple without Steve Jobs, Apple with Steve Jobs. So it's pretty clear that the guy's pretty good. He's my best friend. I confess to that. He's an extraordinary human being. Not only, the iMac was his idea. He didn't build the iMac, he didn't do all the work, but the idea to build a computer that was different, the Think Different campaign.
So basically he had to create, this is an interesting study in marketing, which you know something about. This is, and promotion.
I just learned from Steve.
Promotion. It is the idea that you had to come up with a new idea, a new image, a new sense of this is a changed circumstance at Apple. And that was a triumph of what they did.
Yeah, and Apple, the big knock on Apple was that it was different than a PC. So Steve decided that that was our strength and our weakness. So the Think Different campaign, who are we? We do appeal to people who think differently. The idea that the PC was much more conformist, that the Apple Mac is different. We think it's dramatically easier to use, it's faster. We try to make that very clear. But it also has a certain amount of cachet that you don't get with those kind of ugly PCs. Steve Jobs, my best friend, we took long walks on the beach talking about buying Apple and how we might resuscitate it.
Yeah,
we came very close.
Yeah. Did you decide not to because you think it's too late?
I think Steve decided not to, and I decided to follow Steve's leader. I view this. I'll forever view this as Steve's company. Apple is Steve's creation. The Macintosh is Steve's computer. The Apple II that preceded is Steve's computer. They haven't done much since he left.